What if revenge could rise not with swords, but with smoke? The night was heavy, thick like wet cloth. A lone pipe glowed in the dark, its smoke curling like a ghost. On the plantation of Kentucky, 1858, the air smelled of earth and fear. People slept, unaware that danger moved quietly among them. Mary moved like a shadow. She was small, silent, almost invisible, but inside her burned a fire that no chains could hold. Every glance from the overseer was a lash, every command a reminder of her world locked in fear. Yet tonight, the silence itself would become her weapon. The pipe in the overseer's hand was warm, glowing, inviting, and then its smoke, Mary's secret, waited, quiet and deadly. No one could see it coming. No one could hear the whisper of her plan. The plantation stretched wide, a world of white cotton and green fields. From far away, it looked calm, even beautiful. The sunlight made the leaves shine, the cotton glow like snow. But beauty was only a mask. Underneath, the ground was heavy with suffering, sweat, and fear. The house at the center was large, tall, and white. Its windows gleamed like cold eyes. Inside, the overseer moved with power, giving orders that cut deeper than any whip. Every room held whispers of pain. Every hallway smelled of fear. The workers lived like shadows, unseen and unheard. They carried the weight of chains that no one could see, but everyone felt. Elijah walked the rows of cotton, watching the overseer. The man was cruel, loud, and proud. He punished quickly and without mercy. A dropped tool, a slow step, a whispered complaint, any small mistake could bring suffering. The field was not just land, it was a trap, a place where hope struggled to breathe. At night, the air grew heavier. The moon rose pale and cold, casting long, thin shadows across the fields. The wind moved through the cotton like ghost fingers, whispering secrets no one dared speak aloud. In that darkness, Elijah's mind grew sharp. He thought about the pain, the lashes, the anger burning inside him. The plantation was a cage made of sunlight and shadow. It held wealth and power for some, and chains and misery for others. Every creak of a floorboard, every hiss of the wind seemed to speak of hidden truths. Elijah knew the overseer's pride was his weakness. He saw it in the way the man laughed too loud, looked too closely, thought he was untouchable. But the fields also held quiet allies. Other slaves moved like whispers through the night, sharing glances, passing wordless warnings. They had stories too, stories of lost family, broken bodies, and stolen freedom. Elijah listened. He remembered. He planned. The house of cotton and chains was strong, but even the strongest walls have cracks. And in the silence, Elijah saw the path ahead. A path hidden in shadows, waiting for the right moment. A path that could change everything. Elijah moved through the fields like a shadow, quiet, but always watching. He spoke little, but his eyes missed nothing. Every lash, every shout, every unfair order was carved into his memory. The overseer saw only a silent worker, unaware that Elijah's mind held a storm. Born in chains, Elijah had known hardship from the start. He remembered mothers crying softly at night, brothers and sisters stolen or whipped, and fathers whose strength could not stop the pain. Yet he survived. He learned to bend without breaking, to listen without speaking, to wait for the moment when silence could be stronger than any shout. He had a small corner of the world he could call his own, a hidden place behind the barn, where the wind moved freely and no overseer dared to look. Here, Elijah thought and planned. He studied the overseer's habits, when he drank, when he laughed too loud, when he left his room unlocked. Every detail was a thread in a tapestry of revenge. Despite his quiet nature, Elijah inspired others. The slaves around him noticed his sharp mind and calm courage. They began to move carefully, to share small glances and secret messages. It was subtle, like smoke drifting in the night. No one spoke of plans openly, but everyone understood that change might be coming. Elijah's heart carried anger, yes, but also patience. He knew that striking too soon would mean death. Waiting meant power, and power, he believed, could be hidden in the smallest act. Sometimes just one drop could carry more weight than 1,000 fists. Night after night, Elijah walked under the moon, shadows stretching long across the cotton fields. He imagined the overseer falling into the trap he had so quietly built. The thought was not cruel, it was necessary. Justice, in his mind, was a whisper that would shake the loudest voices. By day, he remained the silent shadow, bending to orders, appearing the weak, invisible. But in his chest, a fire burned. Each glance at the overseer, each beat of the wind, each sigh of a tired worker added fuel to that fire. He was not just a man in chains. He was a storm gathering strength, ready to break free in a single, precise moment. And so Elijah waited, patient, quiet, unseen, a shadow in a house built on cotton and pain, carrying a secret that could change everything. The days grew hotter, the cotton fields endless, and the overseer's cruelty sharper than ever. Elijah watched him closely, noting every gesture, every habit. The man moved like he owned the world, but Elijah saw cracks in his armor. Pride, arrogance, and carelessness, they were all weaknesses that could be used. Each morning, the overseer drank his bitter medicine. It was a small ritual, almost unnoticed, but Elijah saw it. The bottle sat on a shelf, its glass catching the sun, its contents heavy and dark. A single drop could change everything if it fell at the right moment. The idea formed slowly, like a shadow growing across the ground. Elijah's plan needed patience. He could not rush. One wrong move would mean death, not just for him, but for anyone who even looked at him with suspicion. So he learned the rhythms of the house, when doors creaked, when footsteps echoed, when the overseer's mind wandered. Every detail was a piece of the hourglass. Every second passed slowly, dripping toward the moment of reckoning. At night, Elijah moved quietly, almost invisible. He listened to whispers, to secrets, to the soft breathing of those who dreamed under the heavy weight of chains. Some feared the night, but he found comfort in it. Darkness was his ally, patience his weapon. The plan was like a seed buried in soil, growing slowly until it could burst forth. Elijah thought of the overseer's cruelty, the lashes, the shouts, the hunger, the fear. It all burned inside him. But he also felt sorrow. The man's death would not bring back stolen families or healed scars. Still, justice demanded action, and sometimes justice came in the smallest, quietest ways. He imagined the moment, the overseer lifting the bottle to his lips, the sun catching the glass, the drop falling unseen, a heartbeat, a life changed. No screams, no fight, just the quiet, perfect justice of one drop. It was almost poetic, like a candle flickering and then going out in silence. Days passed,
and Elijah practiced patience. Every movement, every glance, every whispered word from a fellow slave was part of the plan. They learned to trust his quiet ways, to follow his shadow, to move as one. Suspicion was a trap, but Elijah was clever. The overseer suspected nothing. The plantation itself seemed to sense what was coming. The wind moaned through the cotton, the trees groaned in the heat, and even the sun seemed to pause over the fields. It was as if the earth itself knew that time was running out, that the hourglass of fate was almost spent. And then one evening, when the house was quiet, the candles dimmed, and the world held its breath, Elijah took the bottle in his hands. His heart did not race. His hands did not shake. He was calm, focused, a shadow of himself, and yet something more, something unstoppable. The poisoned hourglass had been turned, and the seconds began to slip away.
The night was still, almost too quiet. The moon hung low over the plantation, casting long silver shadows across the fields. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew that something irreversible was about to happen. In the shadows, Mary moved like a ghost, her hands steady, her heart a quiet drumbeat of purpose. The overseer sat alone on the porch, pipe in hand, unaware of the danger hidden in plain sight. The soft glow of the embers painted his face in orange, highlighting the arrogance that had blinded him for so long. He drew the smoke slowly, savoring the taste, confident that his power could not be challenged. Not here, not now. Mary's eyes never left him. She had prepared for this moment with patience and care, learning every habit, every weakness. She knew exactly when and how to act. The arsenic she had hidden for months now waited quietly, small and deadly, like a serpent curled in the dark. Every step, every glance, every movement she had made led to this night. She approached silently, blending with the shadows, a figure of patience and purpose. Her hand hovered over the pipe, trembling not with fear, but with the weight of justice. The overseer blew smoke into the night, never suspecting the invisible force ready to strike. The ember in his pipe glowed brighter as he took another draw, the final act of carelessness that sealed his fate. Mary's hand moved quickly, with precision honed over months. The poison touched the tobacco, invisible and silent. The overseer did not notice, did not sense the danger that now breathed with him. He exhaled the smoke once more, and it twisted in the air like a serpent, carrying within it the spark of vengeance. Moments passed. The overseer took another draw, coughing lightly at first, dismissing it as irritation. But then the change came. His face paled, his breath quickened, and the pipe fell from his hand with a soft clatter. Panic rose in his eyes as he realized something was wrong. Too late to undo it. He stumbled, gripping the railing, his mind racing, his body betraying him. Mary watched from the shadows, heart steady, eyes fixed. She felt no joy in the suffering, only the cold satisfaction that justice, long delayed, had found its way. The overseer, once a figure of terror, now struggled against the invisible chains of fate. His arrogance had blinded him, and the plantation, for the first time, seemed to shift under her quiet power. The enslaved people, hidden in their quarters, felt a strange ripple pass through the night, a shift in the air, a change in the balance of fear and hope. Mary had acted, and the world, small as it was, had begun to tilt. Whispers would carry her act through the quarters, spreading courage, awe, and terror in equal measure. Yet, even as the overseer collapsed, the act did not end the story. The plantation held its breath, waiting for the consequences, for the chain reaction that Mary's courage had set in motion. Guards would search, accusations would fly, and punishment would come. But the moment of rebellion, small yet undeniable, had arrived. The ember had finally become flame. Mary retreated into the darkness, silent and unseen. She had not yet celebrated. She had only acted. Her fire burned quietly within, steady and strong, ready for what must come next. The overseer lay defeated, his power stripped in an instant, his empire of fear shaken by a single precise act. The pipe, now discarded on the porch, seemed almost innocent, glowing faintly in the moonlight. But within it had traveled more than smoke. It had carried justice, the will of someone long ignored, someone underestimated, someone whose silence had hidden a storm. And so the night held its breath. The plantation, once a cage of fear and obedience, now felt the first stirrings of change. The overseer's world was broken, if only for a moment. Mary remained a shadow, a silent force, a reminder that even the smallest ember can set the mightiest fire alight. In that quiet darkness, the story was far from over, but for the first time, the chains of silence had been shaken, and the power of the overlooked had been revealed. Mary, the silent ember, had become the flame that could not be ignored.
The morning sun rose slowly, pale and weak over the plantation. Its light spilled across the fields, but it could not warm the cold weight that hung in the air. The overseer's absence, or perhaps his struggle, had already begun to stir whispers. Doors creaked, footsteps faltered, and eyes darted nervously, seeking answers in the faces of those around them. Mary stayed in the shadows, watching. She had acted, yes, but she knew the consequences would not vanish with the night. The overseer's guards moved faster, more sharply, eyes scanning the quarters and the fields. They questioned, demanded, and threatened. Every glance in her direction made her pulse quicken, but she remained calm, steady, a shadow within the storm. The enslaved people whispered among themselves, hushed and careful. Some feared her courage, others admired it. They spoke in half-sentences and nods, careful not to draw attention. Secrets moved like smoke through the quarters, invisible yet undeniable. Mary's act had sparked something small, quiet, and powerful. Even in fear, hope began to grow. The overseer himself, weakened and trembling, had not yet been seen by others. Rumors flew through the plantation, some true, some exaggerated, each more frightening than the last. His empire of fear had cracked. The people who once bent beneath his gaze now lifted their heads slightly, daring to meet one another's eyes. The chain of command, once absolute, had a gap, and in that gap, Mary's courage thrived. Yet danger remained. The overseer's allies would act, searching for someone to blame. Mary understood this. She had planned carefully, but the world beyond her control was unpredictable. Each step, each whispered word, each cautious movement could decide life or death. The shadows were her allies, patience her weapon, silence her shield. In the kitchens, the quarters, and the barns, tension rippled like water. The other enslaved people watched Mary closely. She moved as always, quiet and precise, never drawing attention to herself. Every nod, every small gesture, every glance carried meaning. She had become a leader without words, guiding the unseen rebellion with her patience, her intelligence, and her courage. The overseer himself, weakened and trembling, had become a symbol of fragile power. His arrogance, once absolute, now seemed hollow. The plantation itself felt different, alive in a way it had never been before. Fear still hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new sense of possibility. The chain of silence, the cage of obedience, had been cracked. Mary knew the guards would not rest, that punishment could fall on anyone, that suspicion could turn friend against friend. Yet she also knew that the story of her act would survive, whispered quietly in the corners of the plantation, in songs sung softly at night, in moments of quiet defiance. Her courage had become a seed, small but strong, ready to grow. Every movement Mary made was deliberate. She cooked,
cleaned, and carried out her daily chores with the same quiet grace as always. To anyone watching, she seemed unchanged, still the small, silent figure among the workers. But beneath that calm exterior, the ember within her burned steadily. She was patient, knowing that survival and strategy were as important as the act itself. By midday, rumors had reached the fields. Guards moved with suspicion, overseers questioned nervously, and the plantation itself seemed to tremble under the weight of uncertainty. Mary observed, listening to the murmurs, noting who whispered to whom, who acted cautiously, who spoke too loudly. Every detail mattered. Every piece of information was a thread she could use in the days to come. And yet, she remained unseen. No one could guess the fire that lay within her, the plan that had already changed the course of the night. Her silence protected her patience guided her, and her courage sustained her. The plantation had become a place of quiet rebellion, a place where fear and hope tangled like smoke in the trees. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the shadows grew long once more. Mary moved among them, a ghost, a shadow, a silent ember in a world uncertain and trembling. The overseer's empire of fear was fractured, but the consequences were far from over. Still, in the quiet corners, in the hushed whispers, in the soft glances exchanged among the enslaved, Mary's act lived. It would live in stories, in memory, in courage passed quietly from one person to another. The night would come again, and with it the flame she had ignited would burn steadily, patiently, and powerfully, a reminder that even the smallest ember could spark a fire no chains could hold.
The plantation fell into a quiet unease. The fields, once orderly and silent, now seemed alive with whispers. Every corner, every shadow, every breeze carried a story of what had happened. The overseer's collapse was no longer just a moment. It had become a legend, one told quietly, carefully, in the kitchens, in the barns, and by the riverbank where children played. Mary's name moved through the plantation like smoke. People spoke of her courage in whispers, careful not to draw attention. Some feared her, some admired her, and some wondered if she would strike again. She had acted alone, yet her influence spread like a wind no one could see, but everyone could feel. The silent ember she had nurtured had become something more, a spark of hope, of rebellion, of defiance. No one could say for certain what had become of her. Some claimed the guards caught her, dragged her to punishment, leaving her spirit crushed beneath the overseer's wrath. Others whispered that she had vanished into the night, slipping through shadows like smoke, leaving behind only the memory of her act. The truth became impossible to pin down. Each retelling added a layer of mystery, a curl of smoke that no eye could follow. The overseer, weak and humiliated, became a symbol of fallen power. He had once ruled with fear, with cruelty, with chains, but his world had been undone by something unseen, something quiet, something patient. Mary's ember had changed the balance. Even in defeat, the overseer's name carried the weight of terror, but his legend was forever marked by a single act, one small, precise rebellion that no chain could erase. Among the enslaved, stories of Mary's courage spread quietly, becoming part of their shared memory. Children would grow up hearing tales of the small, silent woman who had challenged the overseer, who had moved like a shadow and acted like a storm. Her ember had become a flame, and that flame lived in the hearts of those who remembered, reminding them that even the smallest, quietest voice could resist the weight of power. Yet the story was incomplete. Questions remained unanswered. Had Mary survived? Did she escape into freedom, or had her courage been punished by chains and walls? No one knew, and perhaps that was the point. Her act, her rebellion, existed both in fact and in legend.
slipping between reality and shadow like smoke curling from a dying fire. The mystery became part of her power, leaving the overseer's world forever unsettled. The plantation itself seemed to hold its breath, as if remembering what had happened. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of smoke and the weight of justice. Shadows lingered longer, and the quiet corner seemed fuller, alive with the memory of courage that had struck silently and fiercely. The legacy of Mary's ember could not be contained by walls, fields, or fear. It moved invisibly, shaping stories, teaching patience, resilience, and hope. And so the legend of Mary persisted. She became more than a person. She became a symbol, a ghost, a flame burning quietly in memory and imagination. The overseer's cruelty could not erase her, nor could time. Every whispered story, every careful retelling kept her ember alive, reminding all who heard it that courage could rise in silence, that rebellion could bloom in shadow, that justice could arrive not carried by swords or shouts, but by patience, cunning, and quiet fire. Perhaps, if one listened closely in the night, the smoke still carried her presence. Perhaps the wind still whispered her name across the fields. And perhaps every ember, no matter how small, carries the power to change the world in ways no one can predict. The plantation slept uneasily, and the story remained unfinished, a ghostly mark on the land, a shadow in the hearts of those who remembered, a question lingering like smoke in the night. Where is Mary now? And what ember might rise next?